I was thinking today that there's a lot of people that when we're going through some of the things we're going through today, people are finding out a little bit about themselves. The Bible talks in the book of Matthew, Jesus challenged us on what we were building our houses upon. Were we building our house upon the sand, or were we building our house upon the rock? So today on Daily Renewal, I want to talk to you about the importance of building your house upon the rock. Hello everybody, this is Pastor Lyle and welcome to Daily Renewal. If this is your first time tuning in with us, I just want to ask you to consider becoming a subscriber to our channel, hitting that like button below and ringing that bell, and that gives you access to over 100 different episodes of Daily Renewal that are all designed to help you in your Christian walk. Well, today I'm going to start off a little bit differently than usual. I read an interesting article, and it's from a very unlikely source. When I was a kid, I used to be a really big pro wrestling fan, and one of the guys that I really didn't like was Hulk Hogan. But Hulk Hogan actually came out this week and said something that is very interesting that I want to share with you today, and he said this. He says, in 3 short months, just like he did with the plagues of Egypt, God has taken away everything we worship. God said, you want to worship athletes? I'll shut down the stadiums. You want to worship musicians? I'll shut down the civic centers. You want to worship actors? I'll shut down theaters. You want to worship money? I will shut down the economy and collapse the stock market. You don't want to go to church and worship me? I will make it where you cannot go to church. In order to halt the spread of disease, the White House has recommended that everyone avoid gatherings of 10 people or more if possible. Hogan went on to further explain that good might come out of the ongoing global crisis. Maybe we don't need a vaccine. Maybe we need to take this time of isolation from the distractions of the world and have a personal revival where we focus on the only thing in the world that really matters, Jesus, he said. One of the things that Hulk Hogan mentions here that I think is absolutely imperative that we look at in all of our lives is personal revival. Where are we at in our walk with God? And it doesn't matter whether you've been sitting in church for 50 years or whether you're watching this and maybe you're just inquiring about Christianity. Maybe you've got fear in your life and somebody said, you know what, you need to turn to God. Well, there's no truer words than that. We do need to turn to Jesus. But having said that, there's many of you that might be asking, well, how do I do that? It starts with having a personal revival within us, something that was once dead that needs to come alive. God created us in his image to have relationship with him. And if God is stirring you, no matter where you are in your belief in Jesus, if there's things going on right now in your life that are stirring you to want to have that relationship restored or see that relationship in a better place, these are good things. So as he tries to turn us to personal revival, this reminds me of a scripture in Matthew that I want to share with you today. And it's in Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. And this is what Jesus says. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I'll liken him to a wise man who builds his house on the rock. And the rain descends, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, and it did not fall, for it was formed on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell. And great was its fall. Well, as I sit and I do this daily renewal, I have to say that one of the things that I am enjoying about this time in my life is the fact that I get the opportunity to spend more time with the Lord in devotion to Him. I see a lot of times I try to connect with pastors, or I listen to pastors online, and I'm finding that there's a lot of church leaders right now that are using the words overwhelmed. And, I'm finding that for myself, I'm actually the exact opposite. I probably have more peace than I've had in years. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that some of the things that we're seeing unfold in the world right now are things that I've been preaching to my church for a long time. I have really felt that the church is in need of revival. Now, a lot of people have different ideas of what revival is, but in my eyes of what revival is something that was once alive that has died, and now, as God gets involved, it is revived again. And I've pastored long enough that I've seen people sit in church that maybe over the years that I've watched relationships with God waver, and people still go to church, they're still faithful, but church has become something to a lot of people where it's more of a social network. It's more of a place where we come because we want to feel like we're right with God if we just come to church. That's never been the intention for God, for us to just meet together for reasons just so we can feel comfortable or just so we can feel good about ourselves. No, there's a bigger plan for the church than what we often see, and I'm sure we'll talk about more of that in the coming days. But the idea of personal revival, I think we have to understand that one of the key things that we see in this pandemic, if you haven't noticed by now in your own life, one of these, the important parts is we get to see where we are truly at in our walk with God. And I think that there's a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, and a lot of churchgoers that are finding this very uncomfortable. One of the things that I've just struggled with since this has all begun is watching churches try to adjust to this new normal, and a lot of people don't like that term of new normal, this new normal that the church world is going through. Now, what I mean by that, I find it almost excruciating watching some of the adjustments that are being made by church today. Whether it's trying to do services online, trying to figure out how they're going to get finances for their church because they've built everything upon a lot of things that finances are needed for. And I really believe that there's a cleansing right now that's happening to the church. I don't believe necessarily that God is judging the church right now, but what He's doing is He's giving us as believers an opportunity to adjust and to cleanse ourselves and do this properly. Because there's a lot of things that I really believe have crept into, especially the North American church, which I'm a part of, that really I don't believe are really beneficial. And in fact, they can become things that drive us away from God and to us looking for comfort in our own man-made traditions, which I talk about often. One of the things that I see that the churches are struggling with is the whole idea of creating an atmosphere. We come to church and we make sure that the lighting is just right. And I know churches that check the temperature and make sure that the temperature is just right in the building. Because, we don't want people complaining about the temperature. We don't want people complaining about the sound. We don't want people complaining about the chairs not being comfortable. I'm going to tell you that once real things start happening in the world, some of these things that we think are big deals in church become non-important issues. But I see this whole thing about church trying to continue to do things the same way. I've got to have the light machine, the fog machine going. I got to have the lights just right. We got to make sure that the worship team is performing just right. And you know what? None of these things are going to hold water when we come into times like we're coming into today. And the church, I believe there's many churches that are not going to make it through this because they have depended on the hand of man to carry them through. Even the idea of taking up an offering. I know churches with multiple staffs that no wonder they're under so much pressure and they're overwhelmed is because they've done things, they've prepared things, and they've even abused finances within the church. Yeah, I said it. They've abused finances within the church to the point where it's becoming a problem now, where a lot of those things that they built aren't going to work. So when a shaking like this happens, it's actually a good thing. If you're in a position where, you know what, all of a sudden, you're not being able to go and assemble together in a building, you're finding that it is affecting you negatively in your spiritual walk, you're finding that you're not as vibrant in your walk as what maybe you were, that is probably a good indication that some of the building that you have been doing in your spiritual life is building upon sand. All of the building that we do in our walk with God, of course, is orchestrated by Him, but it's also built upon Him. Jesus is our rock. Our church services are not our rock. Our pastor's eloquent preaching is not our rock. Our being able to give to missions and do all these things, all of this stuff that we've done might have made us feel good temporarily, but when a real shaking comes, it reveals to us what we have been building with and what we've been building upon. So, if you are finding that some of that building has been shaken in your life, then praise God, you're in the right place today, and we need to be thanking the Lord that He's revealing this to us. Again, it's not that He's judging us. I believe it's a time that we have to embrace and say, you know what? I need to take this opportunity to prepare and realize where I'm at, and I need to embrace it, and I need to move forward. This is a good thing that you're going through. And that leads right into the second point that I want to talk to you about as far as the benefit of what this world pandemic is going through. God is giving us a time, a period of time to get this right. And again, we have to embrace this. In the book of Hebrews chapter 12, starting in verse 25, in fact, from verse 25 to 29, it talks about the fact that there is a shaking that is going to happen. I believe we're in that shaking right now. Anything that can be shaken will be shaken. God is shaking His church. He's shaking those who called upon His name, and anything that can be shaken will be. In other words, the revealing of things that can be shaken is a good thing, as I earlier mentioned. Now, I want to focus, though, on verse 28, where it says this, "Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken," we're part of that kingdom, "let us have grace by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire." Now, notice it says, let us have grace. Again, the grace of God. The power of God that enables us to do what we cannot do in our own strength. Let us have the power of God. Not our power, but God's power. That anything that can be shaken is shaken often because we're doing things in our own strength. Well, God is once again saying, whatever we're going to do, if it's going to hold, if it's going to stand fast, it's going to be because it's sourced in God's grace. It's sourced in Him. So, let us have grace by which we may serve God acceptably. There's a lot of ways that we have chosen to serve God. And for me as a church leader, I'm going to tell you, there's been many times where I've been so busy serving Jesus that Jesus has been left out of the equation. Now, when I say many times, I find there's been times in my life where I've got so busy doing ministry that I have neglected the most important part. And what is that? It's actually ministering to Jesus. Our first priority is to spend time with the Lord in worship, to commune with Him, to relate with Him. And I know there's probably people even listening to this today and you're saying, you know what, I've been so busy with ministry, and you may not want to admit it, but if you think about it to yourself, you say, you know, I got so busy, I forgot my first love. And you're finding out now that you're in a position where your spiritual health is in decline, and you're maybe noticing this. There's a lot of people that if you want to look at what your devotional or your spiritual health is like, all you got to do is look at your devotional life. It used to be that we would say, well, I'm so busy, and that's why I'm having trouble. I'm not spending as much time with God. I've heard a lot of excuses like that. Well, right now, we're in a time where most people have more time than they've ever had to see an increase in their devotional life, and yet there's a struggle to do it. Why is that? It's not because of your lack of time. It's because of your lack of priority. Right now, our priority, and if you're going to battle for anything, especially you church leaders, but it goes from church leaders to brand new believers, battle for your time of devotion with the Lord. Work on having that time. Make it a priority in your relationship. Any relationship that is going to be strong, whether it's natural or spiritual, there has to be time spent. And we'll talk more about that in the coming days. And if you need help with that, I really suggest that you DM me, get a hold of me on Facebook, private message me, whatever you want to call it, and I will gladly help you with that. But we're in a season where you cannot afford to keep building with the same materials and on the same foundation of sand. You will not get any better results if you don't make some changes. This is a time where God is gently telling us it's time for change. We need a personal revival. And saying that, we have to look to build upon the rock. And that rock is Jesus. Well, I hope you got something out of that today. If you did, I just want to ask you to consider becoming a subscriber to our channel, hitting that like button, and share these videos with as many people as you think that they will help. There's a lot of people that could use the encouragement today, especially in drawing close to God. So having said that, I'm looking forward to our next episode of Daily Renewal. Until then, God bless you and have a great day.